The Song in the Night. In the year 2187, the world is no longer the same. After the gene catastrophe, a CRISPR virus leak from a global DNA editing center. Humanity was split into two species, the pure and the mutated. The pure live in domed cities, where air is filtered, artificial lights mimic the sun, and strict laws protect genetic purity. They consider the mutated as monsters, a threat that must be eradicated. The mutated, survivors affected by the virus, roam outside, in the greylands, where plants glow at night and animals can change form with the phases of the moon. In the ruins of an old city, Kael, a 16-year-old mutated boy, possesses a strange ability. His singing voice can influence the emotions and perception of nearby creatures. When Kael sings, wild beasts become tame, storms subside, and even humans fall into a trance. He doesn't know where the power comes from. Only that his mother, a former scientist at the World Genetics Institute, sacrificed herself to smuggle him out of East Dome when he was just a newborn. One day, Kael encounters Lyra, a pure girl who had an accident and got lost in the Greylands. At first, she hated and feared him. But over several nights, as Kael sang to her, her heart slowly changed. Lyra told Kael about an upcoming plan the East Dome was preparing to release a new, cleansing virus, capable of wiping out all mutated. Kael faced a choice: continue hiding or rise up, and use his gift to fight extinction. With a voice that could travel through electromagnetic signals, Kael and Lyra infiltrated the central broadcast tower. At the decisive moment, Kael stood before millions of speakers and began to sing. The echo of his voice spread across the Greylands, reaching the minds of those with their fingers on the trigger, flooding them with memories, emotions, and even regret. The virus launch was stopped. After that event, a new world began to form. The line between pure and mutated faded. People called Kael the last singer, the one who used his voice to reconnect a broken world. But Kael knew the mutation wasn't over. It was the future, the evolution. And his song was merely the first symphony of a new era of humanity. When Lyra opened her eyes, she didn't see the artificial sky of the dome, but a rusted iron ceiling and red curtains swaying in the wind. The soft glow of a lumora tree surrounded her, like a small circle of life in the dead land. She tried to sit up. Pain in her leg forced a groan from her lips. A voice spoke, deep, soft, and unfamiliar. "You should stay still. Your leg is broken." Lyra turned her head and saw a boy sitting on the edge of the stage, a torn cloak over his shoulder, lit by the glowing plant nearby. But what truly terrified her were his eyes. Clear as water, but without pupils. Eyes of a mutated. She bolted upright by instinct, pulling a small knife from her sleeve. "Don't come closer," she screamed. The boy didn't react. He only tilted his head, as if listening to a single off-key note. "You're pure. From the dome. The crash site is 10 kilometers from here. You're lucky to be alive." "And what are you? A mutant? A monster?" Lyra hissed, gripping the knife tighter. For 2 days after the crash, Kael cared for Lyra like a silent shadow. He brewed soup with anti-radiation herbs, made a leg splint for her from tree resin. And every night, he sat on the old stage, singing in the dark. At first, Lyra hid in the corner, trying to cover her ears. But that voice, it was strange. It didn't seem to come from a human throat, but from the space around her. The sound crept into her mind, unlocking hidden memories, making her dream of her lost mother's face, the scent of fresh grass in childhood. And even memories that weren't hers. Memories of a woman in a lab, holding a child with eyes like water. Memories of a manhunt, of fire, and a lullaby under wailing alarms. On the third day, Lyra finally spoke. "Your voice, it made me see things I've never seen before." Kael nodded slightly. "I don't know why. Every time I sing, everything around me changes. Even people. Do you know, you're not a normal mutant? My mother was a scientist. She hid me from the dome. I don't remember much, only her voice, and that song." Lyra was silent for a long time. "My name is Lyra. I was a signal analyst officer at the Eastern Dome. I didn't crash by accident. I ran." Kael's eyes flared. "Why?" "Because I found out what they were preparing. A new virus, it can target anyone with modified genes. It won't just kill mutants, it'll spread to nature. They call it green genesis, a biological purge." Kael felt his blood turn cold. "When?" "In 4 days. They'll release it from the central broadcast station, through the upper atmosphere." A heavy silence filled the air. Kael looked at his hands. The hands of a deformed one, rejected by the world. But inside, the song was rising like a wave. He could feel it, if he sang there, if his voice could reach them. I have to reach the broadcast station, Kael said firmly. You're insane, Lyra whispered. That place is protected by hundreds of security layers, autorobots, and, if they catch you. If I don't go, everyone will die. Lyra looked at Kael. In his eyes, there was no anger, no hatred. Only a strange light, a peace she had never seen in a human being. Then she nodded. I'll get you inside. But there's only one chance. Kael smiled, the first smile since they met. And in the darkness of the gray earth, beneath the light of the Lamora tree, the song rose again, no longer lonely, but the first call of a journey with no return. The fourth night after the crash. A blood-red moon hung in the sky like the silent eye of death. The gray earth was silent, no insects, no wind. The silence of souls on the verge of awakening. Kael and Lyra stood atop a crumbling tower. From there, the central broadcast station was visible in the distance. It looked like a giant black needle piercing the night sky. Its body covered in solar panels, red lights flickering like an artificial heartbeat. The plan was simple, but dangerously insane. Lyra, as a technical officer, would use her personal code to open the Level 1 service bay. Kael looked at her without replying. But his eyes said everything, there was no turning back. That bay was the least monitored area. From there, they'd sneak past 3 layers of automated security, patrol drones, a jamming tower, and a DNA gate. Each one could kill a person in under 3 seconds. Kael would remain silent until the signal transmission floor. Home to a massive frequency broadcasting system that transmitted information worldwide. If he sang there, and if they were lucky, his voice could override control signals, influencing operators, maybe even the entire network. What if you sing the wrong frequency? Lyra had once asked. Then I die. But if I stay silent, we all die. Level 1, dust and memory. The service door screeched open. The scent of burnt plastic, wires, and mildew hit them. The hallway walls were lined with fiber optic cables like nerves of a massive creature. Flickering lights made Kael dizzy, he had never seen a place this bright. Stay close, Lyra said, her hand trembling on the control panel. They passed the first drone layer. Kael held his breath as a drone swept by. Its sensor scanning him. Lyra triggered the cloaking field, 5 seconds only. The drone passed. No detection. 1 layer down. Level 2, jamming tower. This was the most dangerous part. Even with Lyra's access code, the central AI scanned all biosignals. Kael's altered DNA was a glowing red flag. Crouch. Fast. No talking. They moved through the corridor like inside a beast's belly, cables gently pulsed, and heat leaked from the energy core through floor vents. Kael felt like he was walking through the gut of a mechanical creature. Suddenly, a ping echoed, Lyra froze. It's rescanning. It found something. The ceiling lights turned orange. Sirens wailed. Run! Lyra shouted, pulling Kael through the final hallway. A mechanical arm lunged, nearly slicing Kael's neck. He rolled away, the blade missing by millimeters. Lyra triggered the emergency lock. Level 3 doors opened. They jumped through in the last second. Signal transmission floor, where the voice must rise. The heart of the station. A vast semicircular room, ceilingless, with only glass pointing toward the black sky. In the center stood a 20-meter-tall sound column, surrounded by thousands of speakers and amplifiers. You have to sing into the core. It'll broadcast globally. Kael stepped onto the center platform, legs trembling. Not from fear of death. But because if he failed, the world's last hope would die with him. 2 minutes until security arrives, Lyra whispered. Kael. He turned to her. Silent. But in his eyes, gratitude, forgiveness, and farewell. He opened his mouth. The first sound emerged, not a note, but a lullaby. A primal melody. Like the voice of forests, rivers, and ancestral fire.